He shouldn't have made it through the night. The young German shepherd, barely past the age of weaning, ribs poking out like sharp lines against his fragile sides, clung to a torn military satchel with his teeth. His tiny body flew through the air as he was hurled from a speeding truck onto a lonely desert road at daybreak. A U.S. Marine driving behind the vehicle slammed on his brakes, tires skidding as dust swallowed his windshield. Through the settling cloud came a bark, a short, raw sound. It wasn't just a plea. It was a warning. Inside that shredded satchel was something dangerous. Something secret. Something someone wanted gone. What happened next would set off a chain reaction: arrests, revelations, redemption, and the chance for both the Marine and the abandoned pup to start again. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. And if you believe a single bark can spark justice, hit that subscribe button, because this is a story you won't forget. The sun still hid beneath the horizon, the early light a faint wash across the desert foothills northeast of Tucson, Arizona. The morning wind crept through the landscape, carrying with it the dry scent of mesquite and dust. A narrow two-lane road wound toward an old stone bridge, cracked, weathered, almost forgotten. The creek below trickled lazily, bordered by brittle grass and thin willow branches swaying in the mild breeze. At this hour, the world was still. Only the rustle of dry leaves and the final call of an owl lingered in the air. A sleek black sedan, polished to an impossible shine, utterly out of place in this empty stretch of desert, rolled to a quiet stop at the center of the bridge. The engine cut off. Silence pressed in. A crisp click of the door broke the stillness. A man stepped out, moving with measured precision. Late 40s. Tall. Lean. The sort of man whose wealth showed in every stitch of his charcoal Italian suit. Silver threaded neatly through his hair, pushed back flawlessly. His skin held the pale look of someone who lived in climate-controlled offices, not under the harsh Arizona sun. His name was Royce Dolman. In Tucson, people spoke it like a rumor, softly, cautiously. He was wealthy. Calculating. The kind of man who smiled politely while knowing far more than he ever admitted. Royce walked to the back of the sedan and lifted the trunk. Inside, nestled among carefully arranged blankets, sat a worn canvas sack. Something inside shifted, barely. With a gloved hand, Royce lifted the bag away from the blankets, holding it at arm's length to avoid staining his suit. A faint whimper seeped through the fabric. His jaw tightened. He hurried toward the railing of the bridge. Below, the creek shimmered faintly under the pale morning sky. Royce stared at the water for a long moment, as if wrestling with a thought he had already decided to ignore. The sack twitched again. With one sharp breath, he swung it over the edge. A muffled splash rose, then disappeared. Ripples spread. Then stillness returned. Royce pulled a monogrammed handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his hands clean, as though touching the sack had contaminated them. Moments later, the sedan glided away, its tires whispering over stone until the bridge was empty again. But that silence didn't last. A quarter-mile down the winding creek, a lone figure walked along the rocky bank, steady, deliberate, practiced. Tyler Wade, 36, moved like a man shaped by years of discipline and loss. The broad shoulders and straight posture still marked him as U.S. Marine, though his gait had softened into something more cautious, more worn. His hair, once clipped tight, now spilled shaggy beneath a sun-faded cap. Grief etched lines deeper than age across his face. 15 years in the Marines had carved him into a man of action, forged through deployments and firefights. But it wasn't warfare that had broken him, it was the aftermath. A year earlier, during a night mission in Kandahar, his K-9 partner, Max, a loyal black shepherd, had thrown himself between Tyler and a grenade. Tyler survived. Max didn't. Nothing had been the same since. Now he lived alone in his grandfather's cabin on the outskirts of Tucson, speaking to almost no one. He spent mornings walking this creek bed. The VA called it therapy. Tyler called it staying alive. But today, something felt wrong. He paused mid-step. A splash echoed faintly, followed by a garbled cry. Not human, but urgent. His instincts kicked in. Tyler sprinted toward the bend. Caught against a branch in the shallow current was a soaked, writhing bundle, the same one Royce had discarded minutes earlier. Without hesitating, Tyler plunged into the water. The cold bit into his skin, but he ignored it, grabbing the heavy sack and hauling it onto the rocky bank. He knelt and tore at the knotted twine, fingers working fast. Inside was a tiny German shepherd pup, maybe 5 weeks old, shivering violently. Its muzzle was bound with wire. Its front legs were tied together. Dirt, burrs, and little cuts covered its patchy beige and black fur. But it was the eyes that stopped Tyler cold. Wide. Dark. Silent. Not begging. Not accusing. Simply trusting. Max had looked at him like that. Jesus Christ, Tyler whispered, voice shaking. He ripped off his jacket and wrapped the pup tightly in it. The small body sagged against him, weak but alive. As he looked back toward the bridge, rage simmered beneath his calm exterior. Whoever had done this wasn't far. But this pup wasn't dying today. Tyler held the trembling bundle close and muttered, "Found you before the coyotes did, huh? Guess you've got some luck." Then, quieter, meant only for himself. "Not that I believe in luck anymore." The cabin sat alone at the edge of a shallow arroyo just beyond Tucson's eastern limits, a small, weathered structure built from old pine boards and sheets of tin that rattled every time the desert wind picked up. Morning light had begun creeping across the ground, warming the frost-kissed shadows beneath the porch. Tyler nudged open the door with his shoulder, arms wrapped protectively around the wet, shivering bundle inside his coat. The German shepherd pup, barely clinging to life, let out a feeble sound, more a breath than a whine. Saying nothing, Tyler moved swiftly. He laid the pup on an old army-issue wool blanket spread across his worn-out couch, then knelt beside him. His movements were firm yet careful, the practiced touch of someone who had tended to wounds under far worse conditions. He stripped off his flannel shirt and used it to dry the pup's fragile body. Sand, mud, and cold water soaked into the fabric. A smear of blood from a shallow gash on the pup's hind leg streaked across the sleeve. "Damn," Tyler muttered under his breath as he inspected the injuries. "What kind of person does this?" There was no reply, just the pup's unsteady breathing and a quiet, frightened whimper. The little dog's eyes never left Tyler's face. Wide. Glassy. Unwavering. Tyler pushed to his feet and strode into the small kitchen. He opened a cabinet he didn't use often, pulling out a plastic tub packed with basic medical supplies, saline wash, gauze, antiseptic, bandage scissors. A kit built through habit and necessity from his years as a Marine. For the next 20 minutes, the cabin filled with the soft sounds of running water, quiet commands, and the rustle of towels. Tyler cleaned each cut, trimmed clumps of tangled fur, and worked ointment gently into the raw skin beneath where the wire muzzle had been. His hands were steady, his jaw set, his focus absolute. When he finally stepped back, the pup lay wrapped in towels atop a faded throw pillow, still small, still battered, but breathing normally. Alive. Tyler sat at the opposite end of the couch, elbows on his knees as he stared at the trembling little form. "You look like hell, kid," he murmured. The pup didn't react. "Guess we've got that in common." He reached out slowly, resting a warm hand against the pup's side. The little dog flinched, then, after a hesitant pause, pressed slightly into the contact. A quiet acceptance. A fragile, newly forming trust. Tyler nodded to himself. "You're a fighter," he whispered. "That counts for something." Names didn't come easy for him. Names meant attachment. Permanence. A promise. He hadn't allowed himself to make those in a long time. But this time, the name surfaced before he could stop it. Ranger, Tyler said softly, tasting the word. It felt right. Heavy with memory. It belonged to the recon unit he once served with. And before Max, his K-9 partner, there had been another shepherd named Ranger during his early days as a handler. A stubborn, loyal dog with a heart much bigger than his training jacket. Tyler looked at the pup again. Let's see if you earn it. Over the next hour, he tried coaxing the pup to eat. He warmed leftover chicken broth on the stove, poured it into a shallow dish, and set it down a few feet away. Ranger sniffed the air but didn't budge. Come on, Tyler urged quietly. Still nothing. So Tyler knelt, dipped 2 fingers into the warm broth, and held them out. Ranger leaned forward, sniffed again, then licked tentatively. Once. Twice. Encouraged, the pup dragged himself forward, one leg moving awkwardly, and began lapping at the dish. That's it, Tyler said in a low, reassuring voice. Good. You're gonna be all right. As he watched the fragile creature fight for every swallow, something inside Tyler shifted. Not pity. Something deeper. Something he hadn't allowed himself to feel since the night Max died. A connection. He sat cross-legged on the floor beside Ranger, leaning back against the couch. The room was quiet but no longer empty. For the first time in over a year, the space felt lived in. Alive. Old memories floated to the surface, not the loud ones that haunted him, but the quiet recollections, Max's alert bark, the weight of him pressed against Tyler during night patrols, the way he'd lean his head against Tyler's leg when danger was near. Then Jake. Jake Renshaw had been Tyler's closest friend in the Marines, tall, loud, always cracking jokes in the worst moments. Jake had adopted an old MP dog named Roscoe, a stubborn shepherd who adored him. They had died together in an IED blast. Tyler had been in the 3rd Humvee. He remembered the sudden radio silence. The explosion's light slicing through the darkness. Max bolting toward the wreckage before Tyler could stop him. That memory had broken something in him. And yet here was this little pup, shivering on his floor, pulling him back toward a version of himself he thought he'd buried. By evening, the desert sky had softened into warm pinks and oranges. Tyler lit a fire in the old cast-iron stove. Heat drifted through the cabin, pushing the cold into the corners and warming Ranger where he slept curled inside an old sweatshirt. Occasionally, the pup's tiny paws twitched as if he were chasing something in a dream. Tyler sat by the window with a mug of instant coffee clasped between his hands, gaze fixed on the fading landscape outside. You weren't supposed to make it, he murmured. But somehow, you did. He took a slow sip, eyes still on the horizon. So did I. 3 mornings later, Tyler stood at his kitchen workbench spooning boiled rice into a bowl. He added shredded chicken and a splash of goat's milk, mixing it carefully. Sunlight streamed through the window, warming the floorboards as the desert outside grew hotter. Ranger lay nearby on a folded blanket, ears flicking every time Tyler moved. He was still weak, still limping slightly, but eating more and responding to Tyler's voice. His tail even wagged sometimes during meals, small half-flicks, but progress nonetheless. Still, something about the pup nagged at Tyler's instincts. That morning, while brushing Ranger's patchy fur to remove stubborn burrs, Tyler spotted it. Just above the right shoulder blade was a pale patch of skin, perfectly symmetrical, shaped like a 5-pointed star. Subtle, but unmistakable. Like a symbol pressed into his very DNA. Tyler froze. It wasn't a scar. And it didn't look natural. He rose, reached for his phone, and scrolled to a contact he rarely touched. A name he hadn't called in over a year. Dr. Ellery Brooke. A former Marine veterinary officer from the Gulf War, now running a humble clinic on the outskirts of Tucson. Tyler had only met her once, when Max got an ear infection. But she had a reputation for sharp instincts and an even sharper moral compass. He dialed. She answered on the second ring. Brooke. Hey, Doc, it's Wade. Tyler Wade. A brief pause. Then a warmer tone. Well, I'll be damned. Marine Wade. Been a while. I've got something you need to see, Tyler said. A dog. Not mine, well, not officially. Found him out near the creek. Another short pause. Bring him in. I'll be at the clinic for another 2 hours. And bring your sense of humor, you always look like you lost a war. Tyler glanced down at Ranger. Feels like I might have just won one. He grabbed his keys. They were going to the clinic. The veterinary clinic sat tucked behind a feed store off Highway 77, a squat stucco building painted a faded green that had long surrendered its fight against the Arizona sun. Creosote bushes crowded around the edges, and a crooked windchime hung from the front awning, barely moving in the still air. Tyler parked behind the building and gently lifted Ranger from the truck. The pup nestled into his arms without protest, his head tucked beneath Tyler's chin as if the world outside was still too loud to trust. Inside, the waiting room smelled of antiseptic and hay. A single clacking fan stirred warm air near the corner. A teenage girl sat at the front desk, boots propped up on a chair as she lazily chewed gum. I've got an appointment with Dr. Brooke, Tyler said. The girl, barely lifting her eyes from her phone, pointed toward a swinging door. She said to send you right back. Tyler nodded and stepped through. Dr. Ellery Brooke stood beside the metal exam table, washing her hands in a stainless steel sink. Her navy scrub top was faded and worn, khaki pants streaked with dust. A pair of reading glasses hung from a leather cord around her neck. Well, look what the desert dragged in, she said with a low chuckle as she spotted Ranger. Is that a pup or a mop soaked in creek water? A little of both, Tyler replied as he gently placed the pup on the exam table. Found him 3 days ago. Starving. Cuts everywhere. Did what I could. Brooke's smile faded into a focused, professional expression. She approached the table, her hands moving with a tenderness formed from decades of treating broken animals. Her fingers traced the pup's ribs, shoulders, jawline. You've done good work, Marine, she muttered. He's lucky you found him. He's got something strange, Tyler said. His shoulder. Look. Brooke brushed the fur aside. The moment she saw the faint star-shaped patch of skin, her eyebrows knitted together. She leaned closer, adjusting her glasses. Well, hell, she murmured. Thought I'd never see that again. You've seen it before? Tyler asked. Once, she replied. 5 years ago, maybe. Same shape. Same placement. She stepped back and folded her arms tightly. That mark isn't an accident. It's what we call a genetic brand. Designer breeding. Some labs and private breeders use micropattern DNA techniques that create visible markings. It's cruel, if you ask me. Treating animals like collectibles. Tyler's jaw hardened. Why do it? Status, Brooke said coldly. Control. Ownership. She paused. There's a man, Royce Dolman. Lives west of town. Big property. Private breeding program that doesn't show up on any official registry. Cameras everywhere. Guards. Money. I treated one of his dogs years back before I realized who owned it. When I asked questions, it vanished. Never came back. Tyler blinked, processing it. So you think this pup might be one of his? Maybe, she said. He doesn't sell to the public. And that mark? It's unique. That dog came from somewhere he wasn't supposed to leave. Brooke continued examining Ranger's injured leg. You said you found him in a creek. Stuffed in a bag, Tyler said quietly. Muzzle wired shut. Brooke's head snapped up. Then someone wasn't trying to lose him, they were trying to wipe him out. Tyler didn't respond. His hand curled into a fist beside his leg. Brooke's voice softened. I've seen plenty of broken animals. But this one, look at him. He's not just surviving. He's watching you. He's choosing you. Tyler swallowed hard. Max chose me too, and the friend who died with him. I didn't expect to feel anything again. But this pup, he's stirring something I thought was gone. Brooke gave him a small, understanding smile. You always had a good heart, Wade. When Tyler lifted Ranger off the table, Brooke placed a gentle hand on the pup's head. If you need anything, records, help, even legal backing, come to me. Off the books. Understand? I understand, Tyler said. He carried Ranger out of the clinic with a different weight in his chest, both heavier and clearer. The drive home was quiet. Ranger settled on the passenger seat, head resting across Tyler's thigh. The soft rise and fall of his tiny breaths soothed more than Tyler expected. His mind raced. Someone wanted this pup silenced. Not misplaced. Not abandoned. Erased. And if that someone was Royce Dolman, the man with pristine suits and cold eyes, then Ranger wasn't just a rescue. He was evidence. A living piece of a secret someone had tried to bury. The next morning, the desert was restless. Wind swept across the ground in gritty gusts, stirring red dust and rattling the chicken wire fence that framed Tyler's small vegetable garden. Tyler was outside early, sleeves rolled up as he reinforced a section of the garden's wire. Sweat glistened on his brow despite the cool hour. Cicadas had begun their steady hum in the distance. A raven cut across the sky, its wings slicing the silence. Stillness hovered. Unsettled. Waiting. Ranger sat nearby, coat noticeably thicker after a week of real meals and care. Though still cautious, the pup followed Tyler with instinctive loyalty, rising alongside him at dawn, trailing after him through chores. But today his posture was different. Stiff. Alert. His ears pricked toward the road that curved in from the highway. Tyler felt it too. A shift in the air. The tightening sensation at the back of his neck, the unmistakable awareness of being watched. He turned. A black SUV sat at the far edge of his property. Unlike the dusty vehicles that usually passed this way, this one gleamed, freshly washed, mirror-black paint catching the morning light. Tyler wiped his hands and stepped slowly toward the cabin. The SUV door opened. Even from a distance, the man stepping out was unmistakable. Royce Dolman. He looked exactly like he had in the photos Tyler had pulled up online the night before, mid-40s, perfectly groomed, expensive suit that didn't seem to know what dust was. His silver cufflinks gleamed as he closed the door. Tyler's steps slowed. He didn't retreat. He didn't speak. He just waited. Good morning, Royce called, voice smooth as polished steel. Beautiful day, isn't it? If you say so, Tyler replied coolly. Royce stopped a few feet away, offering a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sorry to bother you. I own property nearby. Some of my neighbors have reported aggressive strays, potentially dangerous. Big dogs, mostly. He paused. German shepherds. Ranger, who had been silent, let out a low growl. He edged closer to Tyler's leg, hackles rising. Royce's eyes flicked downward. For just a moment, barely half a heartbeat, his expression cracked. His pupils shrank. Recognition flashed across his face. Ranger sensed it. The pup tucked himself behind Tyler's leg, still growling. I see you've got one, Royce said, voice thinner now. Handsome dog. Where'd you find him? Found him by the creek, Tyler answered. Someone tried drowning him. Royce nodded slowly, jaw clenching. Well, desert's harsh. They wander off. These things happen. Tyler held his gaze. Sometimes things happen on purpose. Silence stretched. Finally, Royce forced another smile. If you see anything unusual, or if he starts acting strangely, call me. I have professionals for these things. He reached into his coat and extended a business card. Tyler didn't take it. I handle things my own way. Royce set the card on the porch rail, his voice turning sharp as ice. Very well, Mr. Wade. Be careful. He walked back to the SUV. Ranger barked, one sharp, cutting sound. Royce paused, looked back, and met the pup's eyes. A message passed in that glance. A shared history neither could deny. Then Royce left, his SUV gliding away like a shadow slipping from sunlight. Tyler stood for a long moment, Ranger pressed against his leg. Inside, Tyler picked up the business card. Gold lettering. Royce Dolman, K9 Genetics and Behavioral Research. No address. Only a number. And a single icon. A 5-pointed star. The same mark on Ranger's shoulder. Later that afternoon, Tyler drove into town and pulled up behind Dr. Brooke's clinic. The desert sun hung high, casting long shadows across the stucco walls. Brooke met him at the side entrance, wiping her hands on the legs of her denim overalls. Her silver braid swung behind her like a thin rope as she stepped aside to let him in. He came by, Tyler said as soon as the door closed behind them. Brooke raised a brow. Dolman. Black SUV. Walks right up my drive. Pretends he's looking for strays. Looked Ranger straight in the eyes and nearly swallowed his tongue. Brooke folded her arms and leaned against the counter, her expression tightening into concern. That's not a man accustomed to losing his property. If he's knocking door to door, he wants that dog back, badly. He's not getting him, Tyler said firmly. She nodded once. You know what kind of trouble he's mixed up in. I know enough. Brooke exhaled slowly. Well, then you need to know the rest. She moved across the small exam room, picked up a folder, then set it aside. She didn't need it. The memories were etched too clearly. A few years back, she began, a colleague of mine, another vet up north, called me panicked. She'd been approached by Dolman's assistant to treat an entire litter of shepherd pups. They were showing abnormal muscle patterns, accelerated development, behavioral issues. Turned out Dolman was pushing genetic boundaries. Chemical boosts. Environmental conditioning. Trying to engineer the perfect, working dog. Tyler's jaw flexed. For military contracts. Private security. Off-the-record projects. Black budgets. The kind of operations that don't show up on any government list. She rubbed her temples. There were whispers of smuggling. Selective sterilization. Putting down any dog that didn't meet their criteria. But no one could prove anything. Too much money. Too many closed doors. Tyler looked down at Ranger, sleeping on a folded towel beneath the table. Small. Calm. Breathing evenly. So he was bred for something. Or tested for something. Brooke nodded slowly. He's just a dog to you. But to a man like Dolman? He was a prototype. Outside, the sky was deepening into a cooler shade, the sun lowering behind the ridge. Tyler lingered in the doorway for a moment before leaving. Brooke placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Wade, be careful. You're not just taking care of a dog now. You're carrying a secret someone tried to bury. Back home, dusk bled into night. Tyler sat on the floor, leaning against the stove while Ranger napped beside him. The pup twitched in his sleep, paws moving as if running from ghosts only he remembered. Tyler's stomach churned with unease. In his years of service, danger always came from a clear direction, a flash, a shot, a threat you could point to. Now it came wearing a polished suit and a polite smile. And it had already found his front door. The next evening, the desert cooled under a wide purple sky. Tyler sat on his porch with a sweating beer bottle in hand, trying to settle his thoughts as the last rays of sunlight dissolved behind the mountains. Crickets sang their nighttime chorus, and a faint breeze rustled the mesquite branches around him. Ranger lay at his feet, chin resting on his paws, ears relaxed but still attentive, always listening. The phone buzzed. Tyler glanced at the screen. Unknown caller. He hesitated. Very few people had his number. Those who did rarely called. He accepted the call. "This is Wade." There was a pause. Then a woman's voice, soft, hushed, trembling slightly. "Are you the man who found the shepherd pup?" Tyler straightened immediately, placing the beer on the railing. "Who is this?" "My name is Emily," she whispered. "I don't have long. I worked at Dolman's ranch, at the breeding facility." Something cold slid down Tyler's spine. "You worked for Royce Dolman?" "Not willingly. I was hired through a temp agency. They didn't tell me where I'd be assigned. Once I realized what the place actually was, it was too late to leave." Tyler stood, pacing to the railing. "What were they doing there?" She swallowed audibly, voice tightening. "They weren't just breeding the dogs. They were conditioning them. Behaviorally shaping them. Isolation training. No affection. No outside stimulus unless it served a command. Dolman called it target conditioning." Tyler clenched the phone tighter. "And the pups?" "There were 3 in the last litter," Emily said quietly. "They all had the mark, the star. We named them Ekko, Zulu, and Nova." She drew a shaky breath. Ekko was the smallest. Gentle. Curious. He never turned aggressive like the others. Dolman said he was defective. He ordered him euthanized. Tyler's heartbeat thudded in his ears. "And did you do it?" "No," her answer cracked. "I switched the paperwork. Paid a supply driver to take Ekko somewhere far away. I hoped to God someone would find him. A few days ago, I heard rumors, someone saw a shepherd pup in the hills with the star. I prayed it was him." "It's me," Tyler said. "I have him." Emily let out a tiny sob of relief. "He's alive." Her voice steadied suddenly, turning urgent. "I need to see him. I have information, records. Proof. But I can't come into town. I'm being followed." "Where are you?" Tyler asked. "There's an old homestead west of Oracle, near the dry riverbed. 2-story barn. Windmill out front. Tomorrow night. 9 o'clock. A pause. And bring Dr. Brooke. I trust her." Tyler frowned. "Emily, if someone's tailing you, don't call this number back," she whispered. "It won't work again. Please, just come." The line went dead. Tyler stared at the phone, then at Ranger. "Ekko," he murmured, testing the name. Ranger's ears lifted, subtle, but unmistakable. Something tightened in Tyler's chest. Recognition. Connection. Evidence. Ranger didn't just remember commands. He remembered who he was. That night, dust swept against the cabin windows as Tyler spread an old army blanket on the floor and began testing the pup's responses. Ranger sat obediently, watching every move. "Sit." He sat. "Down." He obeyed instantly. "Stay." Ranger didn't flinch. But then Tyler tested something else, something more specialized. "Scan left." Ranger shifted, ears and eyes sweeping the left side of the room in a smooth, practiced motion. "Scan right." Perfect rotation. Controlled. Silent. Tyler swallowed. "Ekko." The pup lifted his head, ears turning toward the name. No hesitation. No confusion. A buried identity resurfacing. Ranger, Ekko, wasn't just trained. He had been programmed. The next afternoon, Tyler drove back to Dr. Brooke's clinic just before closing. She was in her small office, reading a file with half-drunk coffee at her elbow. She looked at him once and knew something had changed. "What happened?" she asked. Tyler told her everything. Every word Emily had said. Every detail from the phone call. By the time he finished, Brooke was pacing. "I remember Emily," she said. "Met her once. She brought in a pup, too young to be away from its mother. Terrified little thing. Said she was new and didn't know the protocols yet." She paused. "That was 2 years ago. She risked her life to save Ranger," Tyler said. Brooke nodded gently. "She deserves answers. Then we meet her." At exactly 8:30 the following night, Tyler turned onto an old logging road that twisted north of the dry wash. The sky above was black as ink, stars sharp like shards of glass. Ranger sat in the back seat, alert. Brooke, in the passenger seat, wore a flannel jacket and denim cap, sturdy as ever. The barn appeared ahead, a silhouette against the moonlit field. The windmill creaked slowly, catching each gust like a groaning sentinel. Tyler parked behind a collapsed section of fence and cut the engine. "We walk from here," he whispered. With Ranger at heel, they crossed the field of loose stones and brittle grass. The air smelled of dust and old hay. The barn door creaked open. A woman stepped out. Emily was younger than Tyler imagined, mid-20s at most. Petite. Sunburnt. Shoulders hunched from years of caution. Her tangled curls were tied back in a messy knot, and exhaustion clung to her like a second skin. When her eyes landed on Ranger, they softened instantly. "Ekko," she breathed. Ranger froze. Then stepped forward cautiously, 1 step, 2. Emily knelt, arms open but still, letting him choose. Ranger sniffed her hand, licked her wrist once. Then sat beside her. Emily blinked rapidly, fighting tears. "I thought he was dead." "Nearly was," Tyler said from a few feet away. Brooke stepped closer. "Emily, we believe you. But you said you're being followed?" Emily nodded, fear threading through her voice. "There's a black Lincoln that's shown up twice near my motel. Same men. No plates. I move every 2 nights. You're in danger," Tyler said. "I know," she whispered. "But I couldn't stay silent. I couldn't let them erase what they did." She placed a hand gently on Ranger's head. He was the only pup who didn't break. He stayed gentle. Dolman called it a flaw. Brooke's jaw tightened. "Monsters think kindness is weakness." Tyler stepped closer. "Why reach out now?" Emily's voice trembled. "Because I have proof. I stole logs, records, vet reports, security footage. Enough to expose everything." She swallowed. "But if Dolman finds out I gave them to someone, he'll shut every door permanently." Tyler nodded. "Then we protect you." And they would. No matter what came next. The windmill groaned louder across the open field, creaking like a warning whispered through metal. Emily stiffened, her eyes darting toward the tree line. A sudden flash of headlights flickered between the branches, brief, sharp, then gone. But it was enough. "They found me," she breathed, barely audible. Tyler's spine straightened. Brooke's hand instinctively drifted toward her bag. Ranger dropped into a low stance, tail still, ears razor-focused on the darkness beyond the barn. The night pressed in, thick and tense. The headlights did not return, but the silence afterward felt too deliberate. Too intentional. Emily wasn't imagining things. Whoever had been circling her life, watching her motel, following her movements, had finally tracked her here. Tyler moved first. "Inside," he said quietly. Now. He swept his flashlight toward the barn entrance with practiced control, its red beam slicing through dust and old wooden rafters. Emily, Brooke, and Ranger followed him, their shadows stretching across the dusty floorboards. Once the heavy barn door shut behind them, the old structure felt like a fortress wrapped in the scent of rusted iron, dry hay, and secrecy. The wind outside rattled loose planks, while dust drifted down in thin rivulets through gaps in the ceiling. Tyler checked the corners, rafters, hay bales, storage crates, then turned back. "We're clear." "For now," he murmured. Emily dropped onto an old hay bale, her breathing uneven. Ranger circled once, then sat directly at her feet, body angled outward, guarding her from whatever lurked beyond the walls. His vigilance made her swallow hard. "That's new," she whispered shakily. Back at the facility, he'd hide when he was scared. Wouldn't look anyone in the eye. And now he protects. Tyler's gaze softened for a moment. "He remembers who stood by him," he said. "Loyalty doesn't fade easily." Brooke moved toward a crack in the plank wall and glanced through it cautiously. "They could be using a drone," she muttered. "With this wind, you wouldn't hear the blades." Tyler nodded. "That's my guess too." Emily hugged her arms around herself. "Dolman has money. And people. He tracks anything he thinks belongs to him." Brooke shot her a sharp look. "You don't belong to him." Emily's voice trembled. Neither did Ekko. But that didn't stop him. The barn settled into a tense quiet. Outside, the windmill creaked again, the sound echoing against distant hills. Tyler kneeling beside Ranger broke the silence when he placed a steady hand on the pup's back. "You hear anything?" he whispered. Ranger let out a low, vibrating growl, warning, not fear. Emily reached into her worn backpack, pulling out a small hard drive encased in clear plastic. The edges were cracked from constant handling. "This," she said, extending it toward Tyler, "has everything I managed to take. Birth logs. Medical reports. Video clips from the conditioning sessions. Not all of it, but enough to expose him." Tyler took it and tucked it into the inner pocket of his jacket. "If Dolman knows you gave this to someone," he said, voice firm, "he'll stop hiding." Emily nodded, her eyes shining with fear and resolve. "I know." Brooke approached. "Where were you staying?" "Motel off Route 89, Emily said. "I checked out this morning. Been moving every 2 days. I have a bag stashed 3 miles out in a drainage ditch. I plan to keep running." "Not tonight," Tyler said. "You're coming with us." Before Emily could answer, a faint buzzing noise rippled through the air, high and soft, like a mechanical insect. All 3 of them froze. Ranger's growl deepened. Tyler lifted his chin. "Drone," Brooke whispered. A tiny red flicker glowed through a slit in the barn wall, smooth, circular, unmistakable. Then it vanished. Brooke exhaled sharply. "Confirmed. He's watching." Emily's breath hitched, panic threatening to break through her composure. "They'll come." "Let them," Tyler said. Ranger's tail stiffened. His eyes didn't blink. Emily pressed a hand to her chest, trying to steady herself as she spoke. "You need to understand how I ended up there, at Dolman's ranch." Tyler nodded. "Tell us." She took a deep breath, voice low and fragile. "I didn't have many choices. My dad died in a fire when I was 17. My mom walked out a year later. I bounced through shelters and job programs until a temp agency put me on a list for full-time placement. I thought it was kennel work. Nothing fancy. When I got there, it seemed beautiful at first, clean, organized, quiet. The dogs were stunning." Her voice cracked. "Then I noticed how they were handled. How the staff talked about them like equipment. How the ones who failed during trials disappeared." She rubbed her fingers nervously over her wrist. I asked questions. Too many. Dolman called me into his office. Told me I had no contract that guaranteed anything. Said if I talked, he'd ruin me. Said the dogs were property, his property, and forming attachments was a liability. And Ekko? Brooke asked gently. Emily closed her eyes. He was different. Shy, but sharp. He'd nuzzle my hand when the others weren't watching. He'd follow me with his eyes. He knew when I was scared. Tyler felt something tighten in his chest. And when Dolman ordered him put down. Emily swallowed hard. I lied. Logged him as deceased. Bribed a supply runner with everything I had, $43. Told him to take Ekko far away. Didn't care where. Just far. When I heard a rumor about a shepherd pup in the hills with the star. I prayed it meant he lived. A soft tap echoed across the barn wall. 3 pairs of eyes snapped toward the sound. Another tap. Closer this time. Tyler moved to the wall, peering through a knothole. A figure dressed in black moved along the fence line, steady, deliberate. Another followed several yards behind. Both carried objects Tyler couldn't identify, but their posture told him everything. They weren't scouts. They were operatives. Armed. Tyler turned sharply. We're leaving. Now. Emily rose but stumbled. Brooke steadied her with a firm hand. We take my truck, Tyler said. There's an old service road behind the wash. They won't expect it. Emily paused. Let Ekko ride up front with you. Why? Tyler asked. Her voice softened. He protects you, but he listens to me. Tyler nodded. Ranger leapt into the front seat without hesitation the moment the doors swung shut. Emily clutched her bag in the back, her face pale. Brooke sat beside her, a shotgun across her lap, a relic from her late husband, the kind of man who'd once scared off coyotes with only a glare and a garden hose. They drove into the darkness. Behind them, 2 SUVs rolled onto the dirt road, no lights, no sirens, but Tyler saw them in the rearview mirror. This wasn't a chase. It was a hunt. And the night had only just begun. The desert night closed around them like a tightening fist as Tyler's truck rumbled down the isolated service road. Dust billowed behind the tires, catching briefly in the glow of headlights from the distant vehicle trailing them. Not close enough to strike, but close enough to remind them they weren't alone. Ranger sat upright in the passenger seat, ears pinned forward, body rigid. He didn't bark. He didn't whine. He simply watched the darkness ahead like a soldier waiting for the next order. In the back seat, Emily clutched her backpack against her stomach as if it were armor. Her breathing was shallow, her eyes twitching between the side windows. Brooke sat beside her with the calm composure of someone who'd weathered many storms. The shotgun rested across her lap, her hand firm on the grip. We've got company, Tyler said, voice steady but low. I'm taking us off the grid. He turned sharply onto a narrow trail barely recognizable as a road, just 2 ruts carved through a rocky ravine. The truck jolted as it descended into the uneven terrain. Behind them, the pursuing vehicle hesitated at the slope, skidding slightly before pulling back. That bought them minutes. Maybe less. 15 minutes later, the ravine spit them out onto a stretch of desert that looked barren and purposeless. But Tyler remembered this place, an abandoned military supply depot long forgotten by most. Half buried under decades of sand. Rusting fences. Storage buildings half swallowed by the earth. He hadn't been here since before his last deployment. But his feet remembered the terrain. He parked behind a collapsed hangar draped with sun-faded brush and a leaning panel of corrugated metal. In the dark, it was almost invisible unless you knew where to look. The moment the engine went quiet, Ranger jumped out, nose to the ground, tracking invisible currents of air. His movements were sharp, decisive. Everyone out, Tyler whispered. Stay close. The depot was a maze of old crates, sand-filled corridors, and shelving units eroded by time. Their footsteps echoed faintly through the metal bones of the structure. Tyler led them to a windowless supply room deep inside the depot, reinforced with thick steel plating and perfectly shielded from aerial surveillance. This will do, he said. For now. Ranger posted himself at the doorway, rigid as carved stone. Tyler pried open an old military crate and found signal flares, tripwire, and a few perimeter alarms. Non-lethal, but effective. He moved quietly, rigging strategic points around the depot's entrance. Brooke assisted him, her hands steady and methodical. You've done this before, she remarked dryly. Once or twice, Tyler said, a faint smile touching his lips. While they worked, Emily perched on a metal crate in the corner, hugging her knees. There was a different kind of storm in her eyes now, not panic, but calculation. 1,000 thoughts spinning at once. After a long moment, she spoke softly. I'm pregnant. Brooke jolted. Tyler froze mid-knot. Even Ranger shifted, glancing back as if he felt the weight of her words. You sure? Tyler asked quietly. Emily nodded, her voice trembling slightly but resolute. Found out a week before I ran. Didn't plan to say anything until this was over. But after today, I can't keep pretending it's just me on the line. She drew a breath. And if it's a boy? I want to name him Tyler. Tyler blinked, stunned. He was a man of few words, but this time, he couldn't find any at all. You don't have to, he finally murmured. I want to, Emily said. You saved me. Saved him. That has to mean something. Tyler looked away, the weight of her gratitude settling heavy in his chest. His expression softened. Thank you, he said simply. He stood, reached into an old duffel bag, and pulled out a battered satellite phone. A relic from years past, but still functional. Barely. He powered it on and punched in a number he hadn't used in ages. 3 rings. A gravel-deep voice answered. You'd better be calling about something good, the voice grumbled. Mason, Tyler said. I've got a story you're going to want to hear. Mason Reeves' voice was unmistakable, rough, tired, and armed with a cynicism earned from too many years on the front lines. A former war correspondent turned investigative journalist, he'd served with Tyler in Afghanistan back when both of them still believed in clean endings. Over a spotty connection, Tyler told him everything: Royce Dolman, the dogs, the experiments, the pursuit, the drone. Mason didn't interrupt. Not once. Finally, he spoke. Where are you? Can't say exactly, Tyler replied. Near old Route 66. Remote. I'll find you, Mason said. Bring your crew and the recorder. Don't move. The next morning, the sky glowed with a pale early light, cutting through the layers of dust floating above the depot. A familiar white Bronco crawled through the ravine, tires crunching through gravel as it approached their hiding place. Mason climbed out, stocky, balding, wearing a jacket that had seen far better years. His eyes were sharp despite his exhaustion. He shook Tyler's hand once, firmly, then got right to business. For hours, Mason listened to Emily's story from beginning to end. He filmed Ranger reacting to voice cues, commands he should have been too young to know. He reviewed data from the hard drive, time-stamped logs, images, medical notes with coded entries. Every page made his expression shift, from anger, to disbelief, to grim determination. What's the plan? Mason finally asked. We draw Dolman out, Tyler said. Get him to talk. Get it on record. Mason squinted. And how exactly do we do that? We bait him, Tyler said simply. Make him believe we've got something he wants. Emily looked down at her hands. We do have something he wants. Ranger pressed his body against Tyler's leg. "We meet at the old farmhouse," Tyler said. "The one Emily used to make contact. Mason stays inside with the recorder. Emily, Ranger, and I go outside and wait for Dolman to arrive." Brooke crossed her arms. "He'll come armed." "So will we," Tyler said. 3 hours later, the desert heat shimmered like molten glass as a black SUV rolled into the dirt clearing beside the dilapidated farmhouse. It stopped abruptly. Doors opened. Royce Dolman stepped out wearing a navy blazer and dark jeans. 2 men flanked him, broad-shouldered, tactical vests, eyes shielded by black sunglasses. Tyler walked out to meet them alone. Ranger at his heel. Emily a few steps behind. Dolman smiled, thin and cold. "Mr. Wade. I hoped you'd come to your senses." "You want the drive," Tyler said. "You talk first." Dolman's smile tightened. "What exactly do you want me to say?" "How about the truth?" Tyler said steadily. "What you've been doing to those dogs. The breeding. The modifications. The abuse." Dolman chuckled, an irritated, patronizing sound. "Oh, please. What do you think I'm running here? Some sort of super soldier kennel?" "You said it." "Not me," Tyler replied. Dolman's eyes hardened. "You have no idea how deep this goes, Mr. Wade. You think I'm the only one with a stake in this? Those dogs were engineered to obey. Not abused, optimized. You can't fabricate loyalty. You design it. Control it. Breed it." The words hung in the heat like smoke. Inside the house, Mason pressed record a second time, just to be safe. Tyler didn't smirk. Didn't move. He placed a hand on Ranger's flank. Ranger barked once, sharp, powerful. Dolman flinched. "I think we're done here," Tyler said calmly. He turned to walk away. Dolman lunged. His guards moved. Ranger sprang forward with a guttural snarl, positioning himself between Tyler and the advancing men. But before the chaos erupted, the piercing wail of sirens cracked across the desert. 2 sheriff's cruisers crested the ridge behind the farmhouse, lights blazing. "Everyone stand down," a deputy shouted. Dolman froze. For the first time, actual fear flickered beneath his polished exterior. Justice had arrived, and he knew it. Dust whipped across the clearing as the sheriff's cruiser skidded to a halt, gravel spraying from under their tires. Their emergency lights cast sharp red and blue flashes over the broken farmhouse, the barren dirt, and the stunned men frozen mid-motion. The sudden intrusion cut through the tension like an electric blade. Ranger growled, body still low, but Tyler raised a hand gently. "Easy," he whispered. "They're here for us." 2 deputies stepped out first, weapons drawn but pointed toward the ground. Behind them emerged Sheriff Harlan Briggs, broad-chested, gray-stubbled, wearing a sun-faded uniform that betrayed years of service under brutal Arizona heat. His gaze swept the scene, sharp and assessing. "Mr. Wade," he said, voice gravelly. "Afternoon." "Sheriff," Tyler replied calmly. Briggs shifted his eyes toward Dolman. His jaw tightened. "Royce Dolman," he said, tone flat. "I didn't expect to see you outside your palace." Dolman straightened his blazer, trying to reclaim dignity. "I'm here retrieving stolen property," he said crisply. "My dog." "He's not your dog," Tyler said firmly. "He never was." Sheriff Briggs lifted a brow. "Funny you say that. We got a call this morning from an investigative journalist, some Reeve fellow, claiming he had documentation about your little operation." Dolman didn't flinch outwardly, but his pupils constricted. "Mason," he hissed under his breath. Inside the farmhouse, Mason Reeve held his camera to his chest and watched through a cracked windowpane. His recorder light blinked steadily. Briggs folded his arms. "I've got state officials on their way," he continued. Possibly federal. They were very interested in the files your former employee handed over. Emily tensed beside Tyler, instinctively stepping closer to Ranger. Dolman's composure deteriorated. His lips twitched. She's a disgruntled worker, he said. Unstable. She fabricated. Briggs held up a finger, shutting him down. Save it for someone who believes you. One of the deputies stepped forward, a tablet in hand. Sheriff, we matched the video files Emily provided. They're genuine. Time-stamped, location-coded. Also, we've got evidence of unauthorized breeding practices, unlicensed experiments, and disposal orders from multiple animals. Emily's breath trembled. Brooke placed a steady hand on her shoulder. Dolman's mask finally cracked. You have no authority. I have enough, Briggs snapped. Royce Dolman, you're being detained for questioning under suspicion of animal cruelty, genetic tampering without a license, falsification of medical documents, and unlawful disposal of protected animals. Dolman's guards moved in unison, hands drifting toward concealed holsters, but the deputies reacted instantly. Hands up, one shouted. Drop them, barked another. Tyler moved slightly, positioning Ranger behind him without breaking eye contact with the guards. Ranger obeyed instantly, though his low growl rumbled like distant thunder. For a moment, the night hovered on a razor's edge. Finally, the guards released their weapons and raised their hands. Dolman shook with rage. This isn't over, he spat. You think you understand the scope of what you're meddling with? There are people, bigger than me, who want these dogs. Who fund this research. You're interfering with. Briggs stepped in so close their noses nearly touched. Son, I don't give a damn about your friends in high places. You hurt animals in my county, you answer to me. The deputies cuffed Dolman and his men. Gravel crunched under their boots as they escorted them toward the cruisers. Dolman twisted his head, eyes locking onto Ranger. That dog is property, he snarled. He is mine. He belongs to my program. Ranger barked, one sharp, fearless sound that echoed across the clearing. Dolman recoiled, startled. Tyler stepped forward, voice steady as stone. He belongs to no one, he said. He's free. When the cruisers finally pulled away, the clearing seemed to exhale. The farmhouse sagged in the shifting light, shadows softening now that the imminent danger had passed. Emily leaned back against the porch rail, legs trembling. Brooke brought her a bottle of water and guided her to sit on a crate. Mason exited the house, camera still rolling, his expression a mix of exhaustion and vindication. That, he muttered, was one hell of a confession. Tyler gave a small nod. You got everything. With audio this clean. A blind man could edit it. Mason grinned. It's enough to bury him. Emily exhaled shakily. So, it's over. Brooke shook her head gently. No. But the worst part is. Tyler crouched beside Ranger, scratching behind his ears. Good job, buddy. Ranger licked his hand and rested his head against Tyler's knee, a silent vow renewed. Sheriff Briggs approached the group. I'll need statements, he said. But we'll handle all that at the station. Might take a few hours. Emily stiffened. Sheriff, am I in trouble? Briggs softened. Kid, you saved that dog. You saved a lot of them, from the looks of it. You're not the problem here. Her eyes filled with relief. Thank you, she whispered. The sheriff nodded, tipped his hat toward Tyler, and returned to his cruiser. The desert quieted as engines faded in the distance. Later that night, Tyler, Emily, Brooke, Mason, and Ranger gathered inside the dim farmhouse. A single lantern glowed on the table, casting warm light across the peeling wallpaper and dusty wooden beams. Mason leaned forward, elbows on his knees. The story's going national, he said. Tomorrow morning, an entire audience will hear what happened in that facility. There'll be investigations, hearings, protests, you name it. Emily swallowed. And me? You'll be protected, Mason said firmly. I'll make sure your name stays out until the authorities secure everything. You won't be alone. Brooke nodded. You can stay with me until things stabilize. My guest room's small, but it's safe. Emily wiped her eyes. Thank you. All of you. Ranger padded toward her, placing his head gently on her lap. She stroked his fur with trembling fingers. He remembers me, she whispered. He remembers kindness, Tyler said softly. That's something nobody could beat out of him. Emily smiled, a fragile, hopeful curl of the lips that had been missing for a long time. Tyler stood and walked toward the broken windowsill, staring out at the moonlit desert. Ranger joined him, sitting tall at his side. What now? Mason asked. Tyler didn't turn around. We give him a life, he said. A real one. Ranger nudged his hand. And we make damn sure no one ever tries to take it from him again. The next week unfolded like the slow easing of a clenched fist. The chaos of that night, Dolman's arrest, the confession, the flashing lights, faded into a quieter rhythm as the dust settled over the valley. But the ripple effect spread far wider than the desert. News trucks showed up outside the sheriff's office. Reporters swarmed Mason for interviews. Animal rights groups reached out from across the state. And though the investigation was still fresh, the first domino had already fallen. Dolman's private facility was shut down by court order. His assets were frozen. His employees were questioned. Some vanished before investigators reached them. Others fled the state. But the truth was out, and it couldn't be shoved back into the shadows. Tyler stayed mostly out of town, avoiding cameras and curious onlookers. Ranger, who now carried both names, Ranger and Ekko, depending on who spoke to him, stayed glued to Tyler's side. The pup's personality blossomed rapidly. He was still cautious with strangers, but he carried himself with a confidence that came only from safety. He no longer ate like every meal might vanish. He no longer trembled at sudden sounds. He no longer curled into a tight ball at night. At Tyler's cabin, he slept sprawled across the foot of the bed, snoring softly, paws twitching in dreams that no longer seemed filled with fear. Emily stayed at Brooke's small ranch house just outside town. The place smelled of lavender soap and old books, and the wooden floors creaked pleasantly beneath bare feet. For the first time in years, Emily slept without shoving a dresser against her door. Without waking every hour. Without whispering apologies to a dog who wasn't supposed to survive. Brooke cooked hearty meals and fussed over her as if she were another rescued creature brought in for mending. Emily didn't mind. She felt like she'd stumbled into a life she didn't know she deserved. Mason visited every other day, sometimes with new updates, sometimes with fresh footage, sometimes just to check in. He showed Emily how many people online were already demanding justice. Some called Dolman a monster. Others called Ranger a miracle. Still others called Emily a hero, though he promised not to reveal her name unless she chose to tell her story herself. I'm not ready, she told him quietly one afternoon. You don't have to be, Mason said. You talk when you want to talk. He meant it. Back at the cabin, the days were peaceful. Tyler chopped firewood. Ranger followed him around the yard, watching every chop like it was part of some important ritual. When Tyler took runs along the ridge line, Ranger ran beside him, fast, sure-footed, graceful despite his pup clumsiness. When Tyler worked on repairs to the cabin steps, Ranger carried nails in his mouth, dropping them proudly at Tyler's feet, tail thumping. Tyler didn't talk much, but he talked more than before. And Ranger listened. Each night, Tyler would sit on the porch with a cup of coffee, the desert stretching before him like an ocean of gold under moonlight. Ranger curled at his boots, head resting on Tyler's left boot as if claiming a place he'd never let go of. One evening, as the sky burned orange, Emily arrived at the cabin with Brooke. Ranger rushed to her immediately, tail wagging, ears perked, body wriggling. "He remembers you," Tyler said softly. Emily knelt beside Ranger, running her fingers through his thickened fur. "He remembers love," she said. "Not many creatures get that twice." Brooke carried a folder full of paperwork. "The state wants to know where Ranger's going to stay permanently," she said. "You're his rescuer, Tyler. You found him. He's already bonded to you. But legally, we need to establish ownership to protect him if anyone tries to claim him again." Tyler didn't hesitate. "He stays with me." Ranger licked his hand, as if stamping the decision with approval. Brooke smiled. "I figured you'd say that." Emily lifted her eyes to him. "Thank you," she murmured. "For everything. For saving him. For saving me." Tyler shifted slightly, uncomfortable with praise but accepting it all the same. "He saved me too," he said quietly. "More than he'll ever know." Their eyes met for a moment, kindred wounds recognizing each other. Later that night, after Brooke and Emily drove back home, Tyler sat at the edge of the porch while Ranger nosed through the brush near the fence. The stars shimmered like scattered embers across the sky. He closed his eyes and let out a slow breath. For the first time in years, his mind wasn't a battlefield. Memories of Afghanistan still lived in him, the dust, the echoes, the loss of Max, the friend he couldn't save, but they no longer held him prisoner. Something about Ranger's presence had carved space in that darkness, allowing light to seep back in. A sudden rustle snapped Tyler's eyes open. Ranger bounded up the steps, carrying something in his mouth, a small, smooth stone shaped roughly like a heart. He dropped it into Tyler's hand, tail wagging proudly. Tyler chuckled softly. "You little thief," he murmured. Ranger nudged his arm for acknowledgement. Tyler placed the stone on the porch rail. "Fine. I'll keep it." Ranger flopped down beside him and huffed contentedly. The days turned into weeks. Dolman's case gained national traction. Experts in animal behavior, genetic research, and law enforcement weighed in on news panels. Investigators uncovered more than anyone expected: financial records, private investors, offshore accounts funding research that skirted ethical lines. Even military contractors distanced themselves, denying involvement. But every story kept circling back to one undeniable truth. One pup survived what he wasn't supposed to survive. One pup escaped. One pup remembered kindness. And because of him, an entire operation crumbled. Emily attended several behind-closed-doors hearings. She was nervous, but Tyler sat beside her each time, offering steady assurance. Brooke often joined. Ranger sat outside the courthouse with Mason, wearing a service dog vest to keep curious bystanders at a respectful distance. The officials scribbled notes and asked questions Emily wished she could erase from her memory. But she answered them. She told the truth. And her voice never shook when they asked why she did what she did. "Because he deserved to live," she said simply. "And because no creature should be punished for being gentle." Her words made two of the board members look away. Months passed. The seasons shifted, painting the desert with new colors: warm ochre, soft gold, flashes of green after brief rains. Ranger grew stronger, taller, more confident. His coat thickened, his eyes brightened, and his instincts sharpened into something both trained and natural. He no longer feared shadows. He chased them. One afternoon, Emily visited the cabin alone. Ranger barreled toward her, nearly knocking her over. She laughed for the first time in a long while. Tyler stepped outside, wiping grease from his hands. "Truck still giving you trouble?" she asked. "Always," he said, smiling slightly. Emily hesitated, then placed a hand on her stomach. "I had my first checkup," she said softly. "Everything looks good." Tyler nodded. "I'm glad." She took a small breath. You'll be part of his life, right? Of course, Tyler said. Ranger barked in approval, as if answering for him. Emily smiled. That's all I needed to hear. That night, Tyler stood on the ridge above his cabin, Ranger at his side. The sun dipped behind the mountains, leaving a trail of fire in the sky. Ranger sat beside him, quiet, strong, no longer the frightened pup he once was. You found your way home, Tyler said gently, resting a hand on Ranger's head. Ranger leaned into him. Together, they watched the last light fade. And for the first time in a very long time, Tyler felt whole. Spring arrived quietly in the desert, first in small hints, then in bold sweeps of color. Wildflowers burst open across the dry wash, brushing the landscape with streaks of purple and yellow. The mornings warmed. The nights softened. And life settled into a pattern that felt almost ordinary. But for Tyler, Emily, Ranger, and Brooke, ordinary had taken on a new meaning. Ranger had grown into a powerful young shepherd, strong-legged, alert, and fiercely loyal. Yet the gentleness Emily had once seen in him as a trembling pup never faded. He was tender with children, curious about everything, and never strayed too far from Tyler or Emily, as if keeping watch over both of them was a purpose stitched into his bones. The legal proceedings against Royce Dolman stretched on for months. Evidence piled high, boxes of logs, encrypted files, testimony from former employees. Mason's expose aired on national television, shaking viewers to their core. Commentators called the case one of the most disturbing examples of unregulated behavioral manipulation in domestic animals. But it wasn't the monsters or the science that people remembered most. It was the story of the pup who survived. The pup who chose kindness over fear. The pup who exposed an empire by simply living. Ranger didn't understand any of the attention. He only knew that every time someone drove up to the cabin, they brought treats, affection, and praise he didn't quite know what to do with. Sometimes he got overwhelmed and hid behind Tyler's legs, peeking out like a child. Other times he soaked in the attention, tail sweeping in wide arcs across the porch. Emily visited often. As her pregnancy progressed, she grew stronger, her shoulders less hunched, her voice less afraid. Brooke guided her through doctor appointments and prenatal classes, acting as an anchor when old anxieties tried to drag Emily back into darkness. One calm April afternoon, Tyler and Ranger stepped into town for supplies. The hardware store owner greeted Ranger warmly, slipping him a biscuit from a jar on the counter. "He's looking good," the man said. "Strong. Confident." Tyler nodded. "He's come a long way. Dogs like that don't forget," the owner said. "Not the bad, and not the ones who saved M." Tyler glanced down at Ranger. "Yeah," he murmured. "Neither do I." One warm evening, Emily sat with Tyler on his porch, her hand resting on her stomach as they watched the sky shift through shades of rose and amber. Ranger lay at her feet, chin resting on her shoes, happily absorbing the rhythm of her gentle movements. "You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't taken that walk near the creek that day?" she asked softly. Tyler stared out at the horizon. "Every day," he admitted. "You saved him," Emily said. Tyler shook his head lightly. "We saved each other." She smiled, a small, tender expression filled with quiet understanding. "I've been thinking a lot about the future," she said. "About the kind of life I want for my son." Tyler turned to her. "You'll give him a good one." Emily brushed a tear from her cheek. "I wouldn't even be here without you. And I know I don't say it enough, but, thank you." Tyler's voice softened. "You don't owe me anything, Emily." "Maybe not," she said. "But gratitude isn't a debt. It's a truth. And the truth is, you showed me what safety feels like." Ranger nudged her knee gently. She laughed. "And you too, buddy." Later that night, Tyler sat alone with Ranger outside beneath the wide desert stars. A wind swept gently through the mesquite trees, whispering across the land like an old lullaby. Tyler leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You remember that night out at the farmhouse?" he asked, not expecting an answer. "The way you stood your ground. The way you protected all of us." Ranger shifted closer, resting his head on Tyler's thigh. "You're not what he tried to make you," Tyler murmured. "You never were." Ranger huffed softly, eyes warm and trusting. "You're free now. And you'll never go back to any cage or lab or shadowed room. Not while I'm breathing." Ranger pressed his forehead lightly into Tyler's hand. In that moment, with the moon rising over the desert, Tyler felt something settle inside him, an acceptance that had been trailing just outside his grasp for years. He could move forward. He could heal. And he wasn't doing it alone. The baby arrived in mid-June. Emily gave birth in a small clinic outside Oracle, with Brooke by her side and Tyler in the waiting room pacing the hallway until the nurse came to fetch him. When he stepped into the room, Emily looked exhausted but radiant, her eyes shining with tears. She held a tiny newborn boy wrapped in a soft blanket. "Meet Tyler James," she whispered. The name hit Tyler harder than he expected. His throat tightened, and he blinked several times before he could speak. "He's perfect," he said quietly. Ranger, who had been waiting patiently outside the door, slowly stepped in when Emily beckoned. He walked up to the bed with careful, reverent steps and sniffed the tiny hand that peeked from the blanket. The baby curled his fingers instinctively around Ranger's fur. Ranger froze. Then leaned in. Emily laughed through tears. "He already loves you." Tyler smiled. "Can't blame him. Life didn't magically become easy. There were still hearings. Still paperwork. Still the occasional reporter trying to track Emily down. But the worst was over. The threats were gone. The fear had faded. And in its place was something simple, something real. A small family stitched together not by blood, but by survival and choice. Brooke became like a grandmother to Emily's son. Mason visited often, usually with a camera in one hand and a bag of dog treats in the other. Tyler found peace in the rhythm of caretaking, of working the land, repairing the cabin, and raising Ranger with patience and quiet love. Ranger became a guardian of two worlds, Tyler's healing heart and the child who looked at him with wonder. One late afternoon, long after the worst chapters had closed, Tyler walked up the ridge with Ranger at his side. The sky stretched endlessly above them, painted with hues of gold and deepening blue. At the top, the wind brushed past gently, stirring the grass in soft waves. Ranger sat beside him, ears flicking in the breeze. Tyler took in the view, the sweeping valleys, the distant hills, the cabin nestled below. Emily rocking her baby on the porch. Brooke's truck parked nearby. Mason setting up a camera by the gate. A life rebuilt. A life earned. He exhaled slowly, feeling the fullness of the moment settle in his chest. "You made it," he whispered to Ranger. "You made us all make it." Ranger nudged his hand and let out a soft, contented sound. The sun dipped lower, casting long warm rays across the land. And for the first time, truly the first, the future felt wide open, filled with promise, laughter, and the quiet certainty that none of them would ever walk alone again.